Hi, this is Phil Newman from Longevity.Technology, and today I'm thrilled to have Dr. Michael Greger, who's a founder of Nutrition Facts. He basically is a leading authority on evidence-based nutrition and the powerful role that diet plays in preventing chronic disease, which of course is very much part of the whole longevity agenda. So, Dr. Greger, we're excited to learn more about your thoughts and welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
I can't wait. Let's do this.
All right. So obviously you founded nutritionfacts.org really as being a significant resource for diet and health at a public level. But what inspired you in the first place to get this started?
Really, well, all goes back to my grandmother, actually. I was just a kid when my grandma was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease and sent home to die. She had so many bypass operations, she basically ran out of plumbing at some point. Confined in a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. Her life was over at age 65.
Wow.
But then she heard about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers. And what happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography. Talks about Frances Greger, my grandmother. They wheeled her in and she walked out. Though she was given a medical death sentence at age 65, thanks to a healthy diet, was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet until age 96.
That's amazing.
To continue to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. So that's why I went into medicine. That's why I practice lifestyle medicine, why I started nutritionfacts.org, why I wrote the book, How Not to Die, why all the proceeds from all my books are all donated directly to charity. I just want to do for everyone's family what Pritikin did for my family.
Well, that's great, Dr. Greger. And I guess that in many respects there are many misconceptions out there in relation to diet. We've got all of the crazy stuff going on with the weight loss drugs in the marketplace now, where we're kind of drugging people to be thin. There's fast food everywhere. But I guess that in all of that noise, what are the most common dietary misconceptions that you encounter in your daily life?
Oh my God, so much crazy garbage out there. But it's just because that's where the money is, right? I mean, the processed food industry is $1 trillion industry. And so, we're just bombarded by by ads for candy and fast food and junk food all the time, basically from when we're born. And they're just trying to muddy the waters in terms of the available science. Very similar to how, the tobacco industry did it back in the day. In fact, the whole, you hear a lot about ultra processed foods. People don't realize where ultra processed foods came from. They came from the tobacco industry when Philip Morris bought Kraft. R.J. Reynolds, but, we had, General Mills. So all Kool-Aid and, all these industrial concoctions, these were actually made by the tobacco industry when they started flooding the food supply with these fake foods, using the same kind of, exploiting our natural biological triggers to take us down this other very profitable path. And so it's not like they were just using the tobacco industry playbook. They were the tobacco industry. Right. In fact, the largest food company in the world was owned by Philip Morris.
Wow. I mean, it's amazing. I guess it's that correlation between productization and addiction, right? And, we all struggle with dietary changes. I mean, I'm a classic yo-yo dieter, right? I mean, I can put it on and I can take it off pretty quickly, but I tend to put it on much quicker. Right. So what are the what are the factors that are really essential to having a adherence to a healthier eating diet?
Oh, well, diets don't work by definition, right? Because going on a diet implies at some point you're going to go off a diet, right? Permanent weight loss requires permanent dietary change. Healthier habits just have to become a way of life. And if it's going to be lifelong, you want it to lead to a long life, right? The point of weight loss is not to fit into a skinnier casket, right? But thankfully, the single best diet proven for weight loss just so happens to be the safest, cheapest way to eat for the longest, healthiest life, and that's a diet centered around whole plant foods, which is also the same diet practiced by every single one of the historical blue zones, these areas of exceptional longevity around the world, where they may have up to 10 times the rate of those reaching triple digits.
Yeah, and I guess that this plant-based diet preventing chronic diseases is one of these emerging arguments that's out there. It's very interesting. I was a vegetarian for really most of my adult life, between 16 and around 52. And my diet was kind of a bit messed up because I had developed chronic fatigue. So I actually went back to meat after all of those years. What do you feel is the compelling evidence to balance between obviously having a plant-based diet and how that works against a meat-based diet? I mean, do you favor one or the other, or do you find that actually there's a line between the two of them?
Oh, well, I mean, meat-based diets, like carnivore diets, this is really these are the flat earthers of nutrition. If you look at, the True Health Initiative, for example, which is started by David Katz, the head of the Yale Prevention Research Center, brought together hundreds of the top nutrition scientists in the world to agree to a consensus statement as to what is the healthiest diet for the human species. Kind of like the IPCC of nutrition, right? You want to know about the climate, you ask the climate scientists. You want about nutrition, you learn from the people who have been studying nutrition for their entire lives. And so you can go to truehealthinitiative.org to find out what that statement is. Spoiler alert, it's a diet centered around whole plant foods. Now, but by talking about plant-based diets, we're talking about primarily plants, not necessarily exclusively plants, right? A plant-based diet is just about maximizing the intake of the healthiest foods, right? As a physician, labels like, vegetarian or vegan, I mean, that just tells me what you don't eat. I mean, do you actually eat vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it doesn't matter what you eat on your birthdays, holidays, special occasions, the day-to-day stuff that adds up. But on a day-to-day basis, really should try to eat healthy, centering our diet around natural foods from fields, not factories, these unprocessed plant foods.
So what is your thought then in relation to the concept of personalized nutrition or even nutritional genomics? I mean, this is something that's quite an interesting advent now with the concept of fast, healthy food, personalized food delivered to your door, right?
Is it though? I've got videos on personalized nutrition, and most of it is absolute scammy nonsense. I mean,
Okay.
there's so much money to be made. I mean, people don't want generic food advice or lifestyle advice at all, right? No one wants to be like, eat your greens. Yeah. Okay. Oh, but no, we did a swab and we took some blood, and based on your biochemistry and your specific genetics, you should eat your greens. Oh, okay. I'm buying kale the next day. Okay.
Right.
So in that way, you could justify spending hundreds of dollars for some fancy high tech test. But no, the answer is the same pretty much for everyone. I mean, there are some people lactose intolerant, some people not. Some people have faster caffeine metabolizers. Some people have, either celiac disease, certain allergies. But in general, there's really one diet. It's not like some foods are good for some people and bad for other people. It's really more like some foods are particularly good for some people or just regular good, or particularly bad or just regular bad. But things don't flip back and forth. I mean, I don't know. It's very underwhelming research base. And it's just these companies are trying to really prey on people's narcissism. They're like, oh, I'm special. I need some special diet.
Yeah.
I eat special foods. Don't tell me to just eat sweet potatoes like the rest of the riffraff. But if you look at the underlying science, it's super questionable.
Yeah. So I guess the thing is that so you're saying there's more or less a one size fits all in relation to nutrition, but of course we're seeing a ton of processed foods out there. We're all concerned about it, right? What do you feel are the most harmful effects, perhaps now and in the long term, of these processed foods on health?
Oh, well, I mean, name your major disease. Right. I mean, it's hard to think. I mean, so now we have these major cohorts that have looked at, diseases across the board, all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease, cancer. I mean, so what are we worried about the most? Oh, well, we're worried about the leading killers, right? So we're worried about heart disease most, and we're worried about, cancer second, and, stroke and diabetes and Alzheimer's, et cetera, diabetes. But it's it's hard to find any major illness or cause of disability that isn't linked to ultra-processed foods. Now, does that mean it's cause and effect? Not necessarily. That's why we have interventional trials. But we can certainly prove that they lead to excess weight gain, for example, compared to similarly prepared diet made of minimally or moderately processed foods. But, and you can go down the various causes. There's changes in texture and matrix and additives and industrial contaminants and packaging chemicals and kind of on down the list, all the reasons besides just a junkier nutrient profile that makes ultra processed food so bad for us.
Okay. And obviously there's a lot of concepts around inflammation, right? So, inflammation, do you feel that these processed foods are driving inflammation and obviously ultimately then consequently leading to those chronic diseases?
Well, it depends what's in them. Certainly there are pro-inflammatory emulsifiers, for example, that are added to many processed foods that affect our gut microbiome in a way that increases systemic inflammation in the body. An anti-inflammatory diet is essentially synonymous with a whole food plant-based diet. So if you look at the Dietary Inflammatory Index, which just compiles every single study that's ever been done, interventional trial, where they take people randomized to a food or not and see what happens to their systemic inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, interleukin 6, and so they can put it together. And so some are really inflammatory, some are really anti-inflammatory, some have neutral effects. And so you can put it all together in a Dietary Inflammatory Index. And you can see every single food ranked. And what is the single most anti-inflammatory food component in our diet? Fiber, dietary fiber. What is the most pro-inflammatory food component besides trans fats, which have been removed from the food supply, at least in the United States? Saturated fat. So where's saturated fat coming from? It's coming from meat, dairy, and processed junk.
Okay.
And also sodium is pro-inflammatory, again, found 70% of which from processed foods. And so, you can see. Now, look, some meat is more pro-inflammatory than others. A famous study done in Australia where they compared, supermarket beef to the kind of venison of Australia, kangaroo meat, and found significantly less bump in inflammation in the hours following the meal, which certainly a step in the right direction. But look, you could argue, there's an opportunity cost, though, to eating that meat. You could have actually eaten something anti-inflammatory, something that actually lowers your levels of systemic inflammation. You could have done that if you instead had, a bean burrito or something.
Okay, so when we talk about these diets that are really kind of on trend, like keto and paleo, your thought basically is that these are going to be, at the end of the day, competing very much against plant-based diets and not a good thing.
Well, you could have a ketogenic plant-based diet. You could have, Paleolithic diet really should be largely plant-based. In fact, before the Paleolithic, right, we separated from our great ancestors, not in the Paleolithic period when we started using tools about 2 million years ago, but in the Miocene era about 20 million years ago. And so up until we started to make spears in the first 18 out of 20 million, first 90% of our hominoid existence, what did we eat? We ate what the rest of our great ape cousins eat, which is almost exclusively plant foods. No wonder we lost the ability to synthesize vitamin C, etc. And so our entire physiology, our digestion, is geared to eat plants, and now we eat whole plants, and now we sharpen spears, we boil sugarcane, we refine grains. There's all sorts of things we can do. And so look, the paleo folks totally have it right. Get rid of this processed junk, right? And look, if the keto, anything that gets people to eat less donuts is a better diet, right? And I don't care if you're on a keto diet and not eating donuts, a low carb diet, or I don't eat foods that start with the letter D diet, whatever it is that gets you to eat. 60% of the calories in the U.S. come from ultra-processed foods. That's just extraordinary. The majority of our calories, majority of what we're eating is junk. So anything to get people to eat less junk is a good thing.
Yeah.
But there's ways we can do that. But it's not the answer is like, let's not eat a donut and just eat a bucket of lard instead. It really does not make much sense from a nutrition science standpoint.
Got it. So you obviously have talked in the past about prioritizing whole foods over supplements and supplementation. So could you perhaps give us a perspective on whole foods versus supplementation in the concept of disease prevention?
Oh, well, in general, we should try to get all our, nutrition from the produce aisle rather than the supplement aisle, right? All nutrition comes from the soil, from either bacteria or from plants. Right, every single essential amino acid. The reason they're called essential is we don't make them. Well, guess what? The animals we eat don't make them either. That's why they're essential. They all come from the ground, right? So we can cut out the middle cow and go straight and get all essential amino acids from plants ourselves. Same thing with essential fats. Same thing, right? The fish don't make these long chain omega-3s either, right? They eat the algae, now look. because the way we live in our modern world, supplements can help some people, particularly, look, if you're pregnant, if you have gastric bypass, if you're alcoholic, there's all sorts of reasons people need specific supplements. But in general, look, think about vitamin D, for example. We evolved running around naked in equatorial Africa. Now people have clothes, have shelter, live at crazy latitudes, like in the UK or something, where during the winter months, no matter how long you sunbathe naked next to the Thames, you're not going to make enough vitamin D.
Yeah.
And so you need to supplement your diet for optimal health. But I mean, yes, so you can get it naturally because the way we live in our modern world, supplementation may make more sense for you.
Yeah. So obviously there are diet-related diseases coming up all around the world now, and we're seeing some of those communities that were living really basic but very healthy lives embracing what's happened in the West now. So how should healthcare systems incorporate education, nutrition, prevention into their whole ecosystem? Because I mean, it feels like it's a dead-end street, no?
Well, so, it's important to recognize that the field of nutrition was born on the shoulders of nutrient deficiencies, right? We discovered vitamins and we're like, oh my God, this is why people are dying from pellagra and beriberi and scurvy and kwashiorkor and on down the list. Okay, we used to die from diseases of deficiency. Now it's completely flipped. Now we are dying of diseases of excess saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and added sugar. And so it's no longer about, well, wait a second, where are you going to get your riboflavin from? No, now it's like, wait a second, how are you going to avoid exceeding 1,500 milligrams of sodium every day? The American Heart Association recommendation. I mean, that is super hard. You eat anything in a box or a bag, I mean, it's just like almost impossible, right? Unless you're only eating whole foods.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's really where the messaging has to be. Of course, that is the worst kind of messaging when it comes from the industry standpoint, right? The industry is fine with you saying eat more fruits and vegetables. When you start saying people should eat less of something, that's where, the shareholders get upset. And so it's very politically dicey for them to say reduce anything. So they'll talk about, reduce trans and saturated fatty acids. Now that's secret speak for don't eat as much meat, dairy, and junk. You can't say that though, because, that's politically unpalatable. But the science is really clear on these messages.
Well, Dr. Greger, I mean, obviously there's so much we could be talking about, but thank you so much for sharing your really invaluable information and your energy, right? You're a very compelling presenter, and the facts that you spin off are just incredible. So for those interested in learning more, please check out Dr. Greger's website. It's nutritionfacts.org. And thanks again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's such a blast. Keep up the great work.